If you bought a banana this morning, you just funded a war crime. Most of us think of this yellow fruit as the ultimate healthy snack. It's cheap, it's sweet, it's innocent. But the reason this fruit costs 69 cents a pound is because for the last 100 years, a single corporation has been overthrowing governments, bribing presidents, and machine gunning thousands of workers to keep it that way. You might know them today as Chiquita, but history knows them by a different name, a name that terrified entire nations, the United Fruit Company. They didn't just sell fruit, they invented the concept of the Banana Republic. They convinced the CIA to bomb civilians to save their profit margins, and as recently as 2024, a jury found them liable for funding terrorist death squads. How does a fruit company become more powerful than the US government? And how many people had to die so you could have a banana with your cereal? This is the story of the bloodiest business in human history. To understand the monster, you have to understand the man who built it. His name was Sam Zemurray, and honestly, you're going to like him. At first, in 1895, Sam was a poor Russian immigrant in Mobile, Alabama. He had zero money, he had no status, but he had eyes. He noticed something at the docks. The big fruit importers were throwing away thousands of bananas because they were too ripe to ship to New York. One brown spot, and they were trash. Sam saw value where others saw waste. He bought the trash bananas for pennies. He rented a train car, and he sold them in nearby towns before they could rot. He made a fortune. By age 21, he was worth $100,000. That's $3 million today. Sam wasn't just a businessman. He was a force of nature. He was the banana man. He bought land in Honduras. He hacked through the jungle with a machete alongside his workers. He built bridges. He fought snakes. He was the American dream personified. But here is where the dream turns into a nightmare. Sam realized that growing bananas was easy. Taxes were hard. The president of Honduras, Miguel Davila, wanted to tax Sam's bananas to pay off the country's debts. Sam did not want to pay taxes. Most businessmen would hire a lawyer. Sam hired a mercenary. Sam went to a New Orleans brothel and found a man named Lee Christmas, a former train engineer who had become a soldier of fortune. Sam bought a surplus U.S. Navy warship. He loaded it with machine guns and crates of whiskey on Christmas Eve, 1910. Sam Zemurray didn't send a Christmas card. He sent an invasion force. They stormed the Capitol. They overthrew President Davila, and Sam? He handpicked the new president, a puppet named Manuel Bonilla. The first thing President Bonilla did, he abolished the tax on bananas. Sam Zemurray saved pennies per pound by stealing an entire country. This was the birth of the Banana Republic, a country that operates not for its citizens, but for a foreign corporation, and United Fruit was just getting started. By the 1920s, the United Fruit Company wasn't just a company, it was an empire. They owned the railroads in Guatemala. They owned the telegraphs in Costa Rica. They owned the mail system. If you lived in Central America, you didn't work for your country, you worked for United Fruit. They called it El Pulpo, the octopus. Its tentacles were everywhere, but even an octopus can be bled. In 1928, in the town of Cienega, Colombia, the workers had enough. 25,000 plantation workers stopped cutting bananas. They gathered in the town square. They didn't ask for millions. They had 9 demands. Listen to how basic these demands were. They wanted to be paid in money, not company script that only worked at United Fruit stores. They wanted hospitals. They wanted toilets in the worker camps. United Fruit refused. They called the workers communists. They called them subversives. They telegraphed the president of Colombia and said, "Fix this, or the U.S. Marines will invade." The Colombian government panicked. They sent the army. General Cortés Vargas arrived in Cienega with 300 soldiers armed with machine guns. It was a Sunday. Families were in the square. Wives, children, grandmothers. They were holding a peaceful vigil. The general read a decree: disperse in 5 minutes. The crowd screamed back, "Viva la huelga!" Long live the strike. 5 minutes passed. The general gave the order, fuego. They didn't just shoot, they mowed them down. The machine guns fired into the crowd until the ammunition ran dry. When the smoke cleared, the bodies were piled like bananas. Now, here is the gaslighting. The next day, General Vargas reported the official death toll, 47. But the U.S. ambassador sent a secret telegram to Washington that night stating the total number of strikers killed by the Colombian military exceeded 1,000. Some historians say it was 2,000. United Fruit didn't lose a single shipment. The trains ran on time the next morning. The blood was washed off the bananas before they reached your grocery store. If you think the massacre was the peak of their evil, you are wrong. That was just brute force. In the 1950s, United Fruit learned psychological warfare. Guatemala elected a new president, Jacobo Arbenz. He was a good man. He looked at his country and saw that 2% of the population owned 70% of the land, and the biggest landowner. United Fruit, but here is the kicker, United Fruit wasn't even using the land. They kept 85% of their land fallow just to prevent competitors from using it. Meanwhile, Guatemalan peasants were starving. Arbenz passed Decree 900. He said, if you aren't using the land, the government is buying it back to give to poor farmers. He didn't steal it. He offered to pay United Fruit exactly what they claimed the land was worth on their tax returns. United Fruit was furious. They had been lying on their taxes for decades, claiming the land was worthless to pay zero tax. Now, Arbenz was using their own lie against them. United Fruit couldn't call the police, so they called the CIA. United Fruit hired Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, and nephew of Sigmund Freud. Bernays didn't sell bananas, he sold fear. He flooded American newspapers with fake stories claiming Guatemala was a Soviet beachhead and the Red Menace was a 2-hour flight from New Orleans. It was a lie. Arbenz wasn't a communist. He was a capitalist who wanted fair markets, but the lie worked. President Eisenhower authorized Operation PBSS. This wasn't a war. It was a PSYOP. The CIA didn't have a big army. They had a radio station. They set up a fake radio station in the jungle and broadcasted sounds of massive battles that weren't happening. They jammed Guatemalan military communications. They hired American pilots to fly over the capital and drop soda bottles filled with dynamite to make loud bangs. They terrified the population into believing a massive invasion was happening. President Arbenz, isolated and betrayed by his own terrified army, resigned. He was strip-searched at the airport and exiled. The CIA installed a dictator, Castillo Armos. Armos's first act. He cancelled the land reform. He gave all the land back to United Fruit. He banned books. He executed labor leaders. And Guatemala plunged into a civil war that lasted 36 years and killed 200,000 people. All of that death, all of that ruin, just so United Fruit wouldn't have to pay fair market value for some dirt. You might be thinking, okay, that was 70 years ago. That was the Cold War. Companies are different now. Let me introduce you to Chiquita. United Fruit changed its name to Chiquita in 1984. They wanted you to think of the happy lady with the fruit hat, not the machine guns. But a name change doesn't change the DNA. In the late 1990s, Colombia was a war zone again. A right-wing paramilitary group called the AUC was terrorizing the countryside. The AUC wasn't a government. They were a death squad. They used chainsaws to dismember villagers to save bullets. They were designated as a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department. In 2007, the truth came out. Chiquita had been paying them. For 7 years, Chiquita made over 100 payments to the AUC, totaling $1.7 million. They hid the payments in their books as security services. Chiquita claimed it was extortion. They said if we didn't pay, they would hurt our employees. But here is the dark truth revealed. In court, Chiquita used the AUC to clear the land if a union leader caused trouble. The AUC paid them a visit if a farmer wouldn't sell his land. The AUC paid them a visit. This isn't ancient history. This happened this year. In June 2024, a Florida jury found Chiquita liable for the deaths of 8 men murdered by the AUC. It was the first time in history a U.S. jury held a corporation responsible for human rights abuses abroad. They were ordered to pay $38 million to the families. It's a victory, but it's a drop in the bucket. $38 million is what Chiquita makes in a few days. So, why did I tell you this? Is it to make you stop eating bananas? No, you have to eat. I told you this because you need to understand the cost of cheap. We live in a world where we demand things instantly and cheaply. We want the 69-cent banana. We want the $5 t-shirt. But in economics, there is no such thing as a discount. If you aren't paying the full price, someone else is. Sometimes, they pay with their land. Sometimes, they pay with their democracy. And sometimes, like the 2,000 workers in Cienega, they pay with their lives. The next time you peel a Chiquita banana, look at the sticker. That blue and yellow sticker isn't just a brand. It's a scar.